Over the course of the next few weeks, we'll be exploring our new economic mobility framework at United Way, which includes education, financial stability, and vibrant and equitable communities. We'll be interviewing experts from around the community who partner with United Way to create change right here in Greenville County. Today, I'm joined by Derek Lewis, Executive Director of First Steps Greenville, and Dr. Edward Anderson, Executive Director of OnTrack Greenville, powered by United Way of Greenville County. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. Derek, we're going to start with you first. First Steps and United Way has had quite a long history of partnership together. Tell us a little bit more about that and why we've been such strong partners.
We've been now 22 years. And when you look back to the history of First Steps, it was actually created through the United Way School Readiness Council. Every county had the opportunity to apply for funds from the state. And it was the School Readiness Council that created the plan for what First Steps would look like in Greenville County. And what's really been most exciting to me about the relationship between the United Way and First Steps is that we take state funds and federal funds, and United Way is able to use those funds to leverage private funds to co-fund a whole host of programs. And so when you look at parenting programs like Little Steps or Nurse Family Partnership or Reach Out and Read, those were all initiatives that First Steps and the United Way together kind of built from the ground up. And it's just really exciting to kind of be a part of that public-private partnership.
So 22 years, that's incredible. We're so proud of this partnership. When you think about early childhood development in Greenville County, in the state of South Carolina, why is it so critical right now for us to be focused in this space?
I just think it's so important because the parents really are becoming the center of all that work that's going to be done for a child. And I think if you had gone back 20 years ago, 5K was probably a cutting-edge early childhood investment. 4K was something we hoped one day we would get to. But now we have PPP and Nurse Family Partnership and Nurturing Parenting and all of these programs that are really about equipping a parent to be their child's first caregiver. We know that only about a third of our kids actually are in some sort of formal childcare setting. And so 2/3 of our kids aren't going to see anyone else except for their families and their neighbors until they get to 5K. So those first 3 or 4 years, you're really building a relationship with those families to help prepare those kids to enter into that classroom ready to learn.
Yeah, and we've learned so much, to your point, over the last 20 plus years in the early childhood development field. For those who are watching who aren't as familiar around early childhood, what does PPP mean and why is that important?
PPP is a positive parenting program that a few years ago, the United Way and First Steps and the Children's Trust were able to leverage some Duke Endowment funds to bring down. And PPP has practitioners who are trained basically to equip parents to understand kind of how to manage the day-to-day stresses that come with being a parent. And what I love about PPP is that it recognizes that we all need help. We just need different kinds of help at different times. I'm a parent of a 5th grader, and today we needed some help. And we needed someone that I could have called to talk through kind of some challenges that we were having. But a couple of weeks ago, probably a billboard that tells me to take a deep breath would have been perfect, And so I just love that PPP acknowledges that every family has the same needs, that we just need them at different times. And so how do we help them find a school counselor or a mental health counselor, or how do we help them just get tips in a postcard in the mail on a monthly basis, just to give parents the resources they need to kind of embrace that role and understand that parenting is hard for everybody. It's not just hard for low-income families. It's not just hard for families of color. Every family struggles with what is the right thing to do with my kid. And so how do we give every family the same access to services and to advice and support?
Yeah, well said. We all need that extra help at different points during our child's lives.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And Dr. Anderson, OnTrack Greenville is another premier partner that we have within our community. You said it really well, Derek, around that 0 to 5 age range. We know that K-12 is just as important. Tell us a little bit about OnTrack Greenville and why it's so important for our students and their families.
Absolutely. So OnTrack Greenville was designed around 7 or 8 years ago under the premise that students mentally drop out in middle school before they physically do it in high school. So Greenville County School District, along with some partners in the community and the United Way of Greenville County, came together to develop what we know as OnTrack Greenville. Again, the design is to keep students on track to an on-time graduation. In doing so, we leverage our partnerships within the community to bring critical interventions into our schools. So when students flag off track in areas of attendance, behavior, or course performance, then the United Way and these OnTrack teams spring into action to provide that critical resource to get that student back on track. What we know over time is that those three indicators, ABCs, are the greatest indicator or predictor of high school graduation for students and post-secondary success. So we do everything we can to try to keep those students on track. OnTrack Greenville started in the highest poverty middle schools in Greenville County. It started and expanded eventually into those high schools to follow those students to high school graduation. Some of our partners that we work with that we've seen amazing impact in our community from have been Prisma Health and our school-based health center model, a model where students can go during the school day when they've been identified to be off track into that health clinic with a nurse practitioner or registered nurse to receive that critical care that maybe a school nurse can't provide. A lot of school nurses can provide Band-Aids, they can lie down if they have a headache, they can give them water, and a lot of really acute and minor care. A lot of times that often results in kids going home and missing the school day. Students that are already behind, that is detrimental to their success. And so what we found is a 95% re-entry into the classroom after students revisit that school-based health center, where they can serve kids they can give them Tylenol for a headache, they can screen them for depression or anxiety or other mental health challenges. They can do things that the school nurse just can't do or is not allowed to do. And so as a result, again, we see an impact on student performance. We've put mental health specialists in place that tracks the trends in the school to see how many students are off track at different times, to be able to convene and bring those partners to the table. We provide summer learning for students because, as we know, during the summer, students lose learning. And our summer program has been designed and actually has created such an amazing experience for students in the areas of English, math, and arts and enrichment over the summer, that those students aren't actually losing learning anymore. They're actually, over the last 5 years, they've gained a month and a half of reading and mathematics skills each summer that they attend the program. And so those are some other programming that we do. And our last partners is really communities and schools, where they case manage students and their families. They go into the home and they find out what's going on. Is there any insecurity or instability that's happening, and how can we connect with the school and the United Way and other partners in the community to provide those critical resources to families so students can stay on track. So that's OnTrack in a nutshell, and there's so much more that we've learned over time.
Yeah, thank you, Edward. And one of the things I love the most about United Way is our ability to identify key partners like First Steps, to also fill some gaps with programs like OnTrack Greenville when they don't exist anywhere else in the community, but also leveraging best-in-class partners who are able to get results for kids and families. So thank you both for your leadership in that space. It's no secret that we've been battling COVID-19, now for 18 plus months. There have been report after report after report that COVID-19 has a detrimental effect on kids and families, particularly our low-income kids and families. Talk a little bit about what you both are seeing in terms of what we should be doing and where you see those opportunities so that we don't have a further divide within our kids and our schools. And Edward, I'm going to start with you on that.
I believe the first large issue that has been illuminated due to COVID are issues around equity. Equity in the sense of providing each student and each family and each teacher what they need when they need it. As Derek mentioned earlier, Triple P, or Positive Parenting Program, recognizes that all families need support at different times. Well, in schools, different populations that support kids need different support at different times. And now it's not just isolated to your higher poverty schools or isolated to families that need the most support. But what we're seeing now is, because of the instability that COVID has created, is that all families are needing something. And so one of the huge areas that we as a community can collectively come around is this idea of equity. Not giving everyone the same thing all the time, but giving everyone what they need when they need it. And that requires a lot of focus on the data and pointing us to where we need to be and where we need to focus, and responding and being very responsive and nimble when we need to be to provide those critical resources. It doesn't mean always doing the same thing. It can be easy to do the same thing all the time, but sometimes it means being innovative to be able to provide those critical and meet those critical needs. And then the second thing I would say is around mental health. Mental health transcends any socioeconomic status. We know that there's an increase, I think, within the areas that we serve. There's been 100% increase in psychosocial cases in the areas that we serve, meaning that anxiety and depression and suicidal ideations are all on the increase. A lot of that exacerbated by the impact of COVID, and some of that due to social unrest and political justice and all those things. But because of that, we know that we as adults need to do a better job of taking care of ourselves. Teachers, we have to really rally around them so that they can be their best selves, so they can be best for our students that are in class. And then hopefully us being at our best can help our students be at their best. And so, and providing them, the students, with the counselors and the therapists and all those things that they need in order to perform well and to see positive student outcomes.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate the way that you've talked about equity within our students and our families. Give me a few examples, like tangible examples of the needs that we saw and continue to see within COVID-19 with our students and our families.
So one example of an equity challenge that we saw very early on in the very beginning was around internet access. We saw that there was no huge technology infrastructure in place in our county where everyone had access to free Wi-Fi. And so through the United Way COVID relief dollars, we were able to utilize some of that funding to provide internet access mobile hotspots for a year to over 150 families in the community. Those families went home with Chromebooks. Thankfully, the district provided Chromebooks for every student, but not every student had internet access and an opportunity to access that homework or those assignments to be able to learn. And so by being able to provide those hotspots for those 150 families, and sometimes they had 2-3 students in a household, we were able to provide some equity there. Not everyone needed that, but that population of students at the time did. And
Yeah,
so
that's
one
a
way.
great example. And I think one thing that surprises a lot of people when we talk about this is that being without access to learning on an ongoing basis translates into gaps that are months, if not years at this point, for some of those kids that we saw within our program. So thank you for that. You know, Derek, talk a little bit about that 0 to 5 range as well and the impact that we saw and continue to see as a result of COVID-19.
Well, you know, one of the things that we saw was that the child care sector really had to step up to help families by staying open, but then also by pivoting to handle school-age kids on the days when they weren't in school. And, you know, as you look at kids and that loss, you know, the more time that they spend away from their child care setting or the more time that they spend away from their classroom, they end up not only behind their peers, but now their peers are moving at a faster rate than they are. And there's just so much pressure on the education system to catch those kids up. So I believe we have an education system that can do that. I mean, I think we have strong after-school partners, we have strong school district, we have strong child care providers. But now we have families that have all of these additional challenges that they weren't even thinking about 2 years ago. You know, we've got families that can't pay rent because they are an hourly employee and their child had to stay home 10 days to quarantine and now are having a difficulty just getting the work done to pay their rent. And so to me, that is the blessing that I think the United Way brings to the community, is that we can wrap our arms around these families and think about all of those hunger needs and housing and clothing and shelter and access to utility payments and just all of these pressures that are new to families that also need to be supporting their kids catching up with their peers. And so I'm just really thankful that all of those partners are available to support those families during this difficult time.
Yeah, and well said on that, because I do think that it's so interconnected. When you think about education, it's really difficult to think of that in isolation of all those other issues that you mentioned, particularly in the midst of a pandemic that we're still working our way out of. So I really appreciate that perspective on that front. we're going to switch gears a little bit. I'm curious about what led you both to this work. Derek, I'm going to start with you. What got you passionate and fired up about education?
I was actually supposed to go to film school and ended up as a camp counselor at the YMCA up at Camp Greenville. And the more time that I spent with the Y, the more I understood that youth services and youth work really was helping to shape kids as they started thinking about their future. One day I ended up in a gang prevention task force meeting at the YMCA, and my wife, who was a 4K teacher, and I went for a walk that night, and we talked about just how frustrating it was to think about these 12-year-olds who were making really life-changing decisions that were going to be with them forever. And my wife said, "Well, it's because you're getting into it too late. If these kids have a good path at 3 and 4, then they won't be forced to make those kind of decisions." And it was just a God moment where I realized, like, she is right on all things, and in this one specifically. And that's how I ended up at First Steps.
Nice, thank you. Edward, how about you?
My mother was a teenage mother, and so I grew up in a household full of aunts and uncles and a grandmother and a grandfather. My grandmother was sick all the time, and as the only grandchild in the house, as I got to be 5, 6 years old, she took a lot of different medicines. And she taught me how to find the 5 or 6 different medicines and the dosage, and when it would change, I would know. So she was teaching me lessons early on, where even when she passed away, when I was in elementary school, the EMT came to get me, and they asked, "What did she take last night? How much of it did she take?" And I remember them being like, "Oh, you're 10, you knew all of these things." And so I think early on, I got a bug for learning. And then a bug for teaching. I was always surrounded by really positive, encouraging teachers. I did not speak a lot as a child. I did a lot of listening. But one thing I do remember early on is taking bike rides around the neighborhood. And I would take my little cousins with me, and we'd go to the railroad tracks and learn about different rocks, or we'd get bugs and like do all kinds of things to the bugs. And I remember just teaching them and trying to teach a lesson, and I was the teacher. So I've always wanted to do that. And fortunately, my teachers they didn't let me down. I always had really positive teachers, or I sought out the positive teachers. And so I always kept that encouragement, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. And the thing that keeps me in the profession after I became a teacher, really, a lot of challenges pushed people away, but I had a lot of challenges. I saw challenge around me. That's the thing that keeps me engaged in the community. And so I was lucky and fortunate enough not to slip through the cracks, and I never want students to slip through the cracks because of their circumstances. So that's what keeps me centered in this profession.
Thank you for sharing that. And to both of you, I've had the pleasure of seeing both of you in action as educators, and I would say that it truly is your calling. So thank you both for sharing that. One of the top questions that I often get at United Way is, gosh, we hear so much need around education. We see that there's an opportunity. How can I get involved? What can I do if I'm a member of the community who cares about it, but I don't know what to do about it? Edward, I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would say would be to invest. Investing is so important. There are so many great partners doing great work. First Steps, United Way, OnTrack. I always say some people are really good at doing those direct service opportunities. Some people love to mentor. Some people love to tutor. But some people like to make investments in things that work. And there are a lot of things in this community that work. So first, I would say by investing financially. Secondly, I would say reach out to these community partners, because we're out here, and allow us to take your skill set and match you to an experience, because the need is out there and it's great. And just know that you're all valuable. We're all a part of this collective village, and we all have a skill set. And so allow us to do the job of matching you based on your skill set. Don't think that you don't have the skill set to reach this population. You do, but it may come in a form that you're not familiar with, and we can help you figure that out.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Derek, how about for you?
Yeah, I'm so glad Dr. Anderson talked about both those, because that was exactly what I was going to say. You know, I think there's so many great things that have been launched here in Greenville County because of investments people made in the United Way and their ability to take those dollars and leverage them against other funds. And so when I think about programs like Triple P, the Positive Parenting Program, or Nurse Filling Partnership, I mean, there's been $10, $20 million that have been invested in our community in parenting programs that really came about because the United Way was able to put some matching funds on the table. And so there's really no way to overemphasize that ability of the United Way to leverage those dollars. And it's just really smart investing in our community. The other thing I would say, though, is there are a lot of organizations right now that I believe are overwhelmed with the needs their kids are experiencing and the families of those kids are experiencing. And so any organization that is funded by the United Way or is a partner with the United Way really could benefit from some volunteers on the ground. And whether that's just coming once a week and reading to a classroom of 3-year-olds, or whether it's helping to prepare meals that kids can take home on the weekends, there are so many needs that I believe that our community really could respond on an individual basis to help these families during this really difficult time.
Yeah, thank you. And I just, a great way to find out about different opportunities is unitedwaygc.org. We can connect you in, of course, with a variety of different options, and it really is needed. And Edward, I love what you said about if you think you don't have the skills, you do. We'll train you in and make sure that you have the right skill set to plug in where needed. But I think that's a great way to get started, and thank you both for that. All right, I want to wrap with a question about education as a primary focus of our economic mobility model. When you think about 10 years down the road, right, this work is long haul work, it's important work that we're doing. When you think 10 years down the road, what do you hope the state of education looks like for young people in our community? And Derek, I'll start with you.
Well, I think that we're on the right path by what the school district has adopted as this idea of being college or career ready. And this understanding that when you walk across that stage, it is not enough for you to have a diploma. We need you to be on a path towards college with already having college credit under your belt, or we need you to be ready to start taking some industry certifications and moving straight into the industry that you've chosen as your career path. And I think if we look back 10 years, we have come a long way. And so my hope would be, if we're going 10 years into the future, that every student who has entered kindergarten or first or second grade this year would be in high school and know exactly what their college career path is and can tell you that they are on that path with some degree of confidence. I think that, to me, would be an exciting place for us to be. I think it's not enough to think anymore about our graduation rate, and we need 100% of kids who are entering kindergarten this year to walk across that stage at the end of 12th grade. And they all need to have a college or career path already in mind.
Yeah, I think that's so important. We had the opportunity to interview Tom Barkin recently of the Federal Reserve, and one of the things that he mentioned is that South Carolina imports talent versus growing talent, and that has really stuck with me as we think about the strong economy that we're hoping to build and continue to have for, our families right now, but also in the future. So I think that's a really important sentiment. Edward, how about for you when you think about the next 10 years and what we hope to accomplish with education?
Part of OnTrack's mission and vision is to eliminate barriers to education and success, but also provide students, families, and teachers and staff with the tools, resources, the opportunities that they need in order to reach that success. I've always been a proponent that our goal should be to help everyone become the best version of themselves. I don't want to be the next Meghan, or you don't want to be the next Edward, but you want to be the next you. And so what we have to do is, I hope in 10 years, that, adding to Derek's point, that graduation is not enough, that we can ask students and families and teachers that whatever barrier is looking at them in the face, that they feel like it's okay, because somebody in the community, there's a partner, there's a system, there's a process that's going to allow me to jump over that barrier, or run through that barrier, or go around that barrier. We need hope. It's always is, and it always has been about the hope to the future, or just the hope to see your dreams out. But it's hard to have hope when you have 20 barriers facing you. But we can get a little bit closer if we respond with the strategies, the tools, the resources, the opportunities to knock those barriers down so that they can get to their dream. I don't think very few people lack understanding that life is going to be tough. But when you can't see a way out of it, that's when you lose hope. So let's continue to provide that hope and never give up trying to be as responsive as we can about the needs of the community and the needs of our kids. And I think we are on our way to excellence if we do that.
That word hope, I think, is so critical and so important. We don't talk about it enough in this work. We talk about incredible strategies, but absent hope, are we able to actually pull off some of those really important things? So thank you for that. Policy and advocacy, Derek, really, really important in all of the work that we do at United Way. You know, we can't program our way out of these issues. When you think about early childhood and the possibilities around policy and advocacy, what are you seeing?
Well, we've made some great strides in the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, if you had asked a member of the General Assembly if we were going to have publicly funded 4K in this state in 2000, they would have told you absolutely not. I mean, I think even the most optimistic would have said that is decades down the road. And now we're at a place where a good majority of our kids across the state who are in poverty have access to high quality 4K. So to me, that needs to be the next step, is how do we expand that access to not just those kids who maybe have dire financial need, but to any family that needs to have access to quality 4K. I think at that point, we're probably going to need to start looking at then how are we getting kids ready for 4K, and what can we do to shore up the private childcare sector and the church-based childcare sector to make sure that they have the resources they need to nurture those babies from infancy to 3-year-olds, so that we can, hand them off to a publicly funded 4K program. So I think there's just a lot of building that needs to be done on the work that we've already accomplished. The other thing we've really got to acknowledge is that this last year and a half has been very tough for childcare providers. And what I think we have realized is that the childcare sector, like many other sectors, has gotten by with paying our employees as little as we possibly can for care that is essential to keep our businesses open. And I think we really need to start looking at some of our policy positions around access to health care and access to retirement benefits and access to a livable wage that probably are going to have to be supported at the state level before we can really expect child care providers who are running razor-thin margins already to kind of make those sort of investments. And so I think the more we can help the state understand that those private providers are providing an essential service to keep Michelin open. And once our child care providers start closing, our factories cannot remain open because parents have nowhere to put their kids. So I think we've got to really explore how we can increase those investments.
Yeah, you're really illuminating actually what we were talking about earlier, is that interconnectivity between so many different issues. But if I pulled out a few key words of what you said, access is huge, and access to quality programs really, really important, but also that workforce play, right? Are we paying our teachers who are working in our child care centers, are they being paid a livable wage to be able to deliver high quality services to our children? So thank you both so much. You've illuminated really this connectivity from, I would argue, prenatal all the way through high school graduation, post-secondary, et cetera, to really ensure that we have a strong future for South Carolinians. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for your passion, your commitment to this community. We truly couldn't do it without your partnership. Thank you.
Thank you.